you all are disappointed. Last year, when I was here, I talked about telling the stories, and there are stories and that people don't tell the stories and we lose track of it. So in the meantime, my cousin Angela and I went out there and we canvassed your cemetery. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a little something from your cemetery. All right. You all have 72 identifiable grave out there.
All right.
You're able to identify.
Well.
And there are 11 unmarked graves. They have a slab or something on them, but there's no identification as to who is buried there.
All right.
We got to work on that. We got to work on that. In this cemetery, you have 4 people with the ages, with the year they were born on their tombstone. So you have a Nancy Chip, who was born enslaved, lived to freedom, died. You had a William Crawford, born in 1844, and a Clara Bacon, born in 1860. They were slaves prior to when they were born. All right, and they all lived to freedom. So keep that in mind. You also have a Vietnam veteran buried there, Paul Edward Tate. All right. You have a World War II veteran buried out there. Anybody know who that is? All right, Ronald, you ought to know. It's your daddy. It's your daddy, World War II veteran. That's right. You got to know. You got to know, and you got to tell your story. You got to tell people.
Yeah.
We have, where's any of the Dolphins here? I don't see none of them. A Korean war veteran.
All right.
Anybody know who that is? That's Tan Golfin. That's right. Alan Nathaniel Golfin is buried out there. Then we have the grandfather of a Supreme Court justice.
All right.
When we talk about Negro history, you got history right here in your yard. So highlight that. The children in this community need to know that people who come from here went on to do good things. And if whether their name is written anywhere, they were at least decent people.
Yeah.
All right? And believed in the Jesus and the Bible. So now I think I've got that. We have several deacons out there.
Well.
Sister Janie Anderson was a musician here for all the years that I could remember when I was a child growing up. And she's buried out there in that cemetery. Then I want to tell you a little story. I got a story and I said, oh, let me highlight one of these people. Boy's not here, and I think the rest, I don't know if the rest of them can hear me in the business office in there. But there was a Nancy Chip, born enslaved, and typically when people are buried in the cemetery, there used to be a rhyme and reason to the way they were buried. If a wife died, there was always a space saved next to her for her husband to be buried. So some things we might be able to make some assumption for. That's not a good thing to do, but some things we might be able to make an assumption for. Nancy was born in 1853, so she was born enslaved. Next to her is no headstone. She was married to a Joe Chip. So it's possible that that's Joe Chip's grave. But somebody around here know those people or are related to those people and might be able to clear up that mystery. But the interesting thing about Nancy Chip is that even though she was a Chip, she was related to the Tates. Anna Tate was her husband's niece. And so Anna was a wing, and Anna also had a child named Olive. Now, where did that come from? Ollie's sitting in there, and she might not even know where her name came from. But it's a carry on of the names in the family. Then I found a William Crawford. William was born in 1844. He was born in slavery and lived to be 82 years old. He had two children. Now, interesting thing was that he had a daughter named Henrietta. Henrietta left this town, left Trade Hill. That's what we call this area down here. They were living on the what we used to call Old 38, was where their house was. Henrietta left here and moved to New York. Can you believe that? Henrietta was born in 1877. Went to New York, made a home there, came back home in 1923. Her death certificate said she moved back from back from New York 6 months prior to dying. And to see how they refer to us, I'm going to read you the inscription from her death certificate. It says that the Negro came from, he said, this Negro came from New York 6 months ago in bad shape. No physician attending her. The Negro say she died from a fever. So there she was, never saw a doctor, had been in New York, got sick, and what did she do? Come home to family. And what do? In those days, if you died up north, you had enough money for them to bring you home. People bury you now wherever they want to bury you. But everybody believed in the old African custom that if you didn't come back home, your spirit would wander and wander and wander. So she came home probably knowing that she was dying, and so rather than come home in a box, she came home under her own power, stayed here for 6 months, and died. And is buried out there in that cemetery. William Crawford died in 1926, and his son, James Crawford, died in 1929. So that was the end of that family. So if we call their names, they can live forever. If we don't remember them, then if we don't pass the stories on, nobody else will remember them. All right? And it looks like the earliest identifiable grave in the cemetery, it was Henrietta Crawford Martin, who died in 1924. It's the first grave that has a date on it marked as being buried in that cemetery. But we know others are buried there because the church was in existence long before that. So somehow or another we've lost it. I ask you all to capture this now. Let's try to discover who these unmarked graves are that are buried next to somebody so that we can get some kind of marker on them. And when we are gone, because very few people in here now know, if you're not, I'll back up. Most people, my daddy last year was 100 years old. So there's nobody around here living 100 years old. So a lot of those people out there were born almost, what would be almost 150 years ago. Nobody knows them. If you don't have a family and if you don't mark their graves, then they will be lost from this earth, almost as if they never walked on the earth. So let us try to identify our people and let us do some work in our cemetery. Thank you.